Today we're going to be talking about slopes of lines. So first of all, let's talk about what is slope. Okay? So last year in algebra, you probably learned that slope is rise over run. Okay? And you probably counted, on a graph, the number of spaces up and then over from one point to another on a line, and then you reduced that fraction to get your slope. So that's one way to think about it. You might also hear rise over run as you progress in math, heard as the change in the y-axis over the change in the x-axis. And this little triangle here is actually a Greek letter called delta, and it just means change. And it's going to show up in your chemistry and your physics classes as well, so you should go ahead and get used to seeing that there. You may have heard slope referred to as the steepness of a line, and we're going to talk about how to tell which line out of two lines are steeper. And then finally, we refer to slope as a rate of change. And so that's going to be, particularly if we have like a line graph with like time and then the sales of something. And that'll tell us the rate of change of those sales over a given amount of time. We also have a formula for slope, and the formula can be found on your green sheet in class. If you want your own green sheet to use when you're at home, you can print your own out. It's on Schoology. Okay. And this is the formula for slope. I'm not sure why they use M for slope, but they do. And so this is the formula we're going to be using. Okay, so let's review how to find slope if you were given 2 points. So, for instance, we have point A and point B here. And we're going to remember that first we have to label our x1, y1, and our x2, y2. And remember that you have to have an x and a y coordinate for each point, and you have to have all the ones are like one team, so they have to be with one point, and then the twos are with another team, so they have to be a second point. And then we're just going to plug our numbers in. So we said it was y2, which is -4, minus y1, which is 3, over x2, which is 1, minus -2, which is x1. At this point, if you have one of the yellow calculators in class, you can use your fraction feature and type this in, and it will give you the fraction reduced and everything for you. If you don't have one of those with you, you have to solve the top and the bottom separately. And so we do -4 minus 3 gives us -7. And then we notice I have 1 minus -2, so that's going to be a plus. And so 1 plus 2 is 3. And this is going to be your slope. Now, if this fraction could be reduced, you would need to reduce it. And if you type it in the calculator, you're likely to get something where the negative sign is exactly even with the fraction bar, and that's fine also. That's the same answer. And then sometimes, depending on your problem, you might get it where you have 7 over -3, and that would also be fine, right? All of these are going to be the same answer for us. But you do want to be sure you leave that as a fraction. Please do not turn it into a decimal. It's just not as useful to us as a decimal. You might also find that sometimes instead of giving you the 2 points written out as coordinates, they might actually give you a graph, with A and B on them instead. And depending on how they ask you to find that, you are welcome on a graph to either count, your rise over run, or you can use 2 points and plug them into the slope formula. So if you ever weren't sure doing it one way, you are always welcome to check it with the other method. And so both of those are going to give you the same answer. Okay. So next we're going to look at the types of slope, and there are 4 types of slope. Okay, so we're going to have 4 different types of slope. Our first slope will look like this. And you're going to notice that if I were to choose 2 points and I were to count my rise over run, that both of those numbers would be positive numbers. So this slope is going to be a positive slope. If I were to have, if I were to have this line, and I were to choose 2 points, okay, and I counted my rise over my run, my rise would be positive, but my run would be negative because I go left. And so anytime you have a positive and a negative, it's like the rules with multiplying. A positive times a negative is always going to give you a negative. So this is a negative slope. Okay? And those are pretty standard, and most of us do really well with those. Then we get to the 2 that throw off some people. And so our first one here, oops, that's not a very straight line, is a horizontal line. Okay? And this is going to be a 0 slope. And what that means is if you were to take any 2 points on here and you were to plug them into our slope formula, you would get 0. Also, if you counted our rise, that would be 0 over our run, okay, would be a number. And so the way that we remember this is 0 over a number is okay, because the 0 is on top, right? And that's going to tell us it's a 0. I also remember that on a Z, the top line and the bottom line are both horizontal lines. And so that helps you remember horizontal lines have a slope of 0. Okay? And then finally, we have a vertical slope. Okay? And on this one, if you were to try to count your rise over run, you're going to have no run. So you would have a number on top and a 0 on bottom, okay? And we say that this is a no, okay? And so that's to help you remember that this, if you were to try to type it in the calculator, is going to give you an undefined slope. It'll give you an error, and anytime you get an error, that just means that it is an undefined slope. Okay, so this one is undefined. Okay? The last couple of things we need to talk about deal with special kinds of lines. So first of all, we have parallel lines. And parallel lines have to have the same slope. They have to be exactly identical. Okay, that includes the signs and the numbers and everything. So for example, if I gave you line A has a slope of 1/2, and line B has a slope of 1/2. I don't have to know anything else. Just from this, I don't have to see a graph. I don't have to see anything else. I can say, okay, these are both 1/2. That means that these lines are parallel lines. Okay? I don't need to see anything else. I don't have to do any calculations. They have exactly the same slope, so they are parallel. Okay? Now, I also have perpendicular lines, and they're a little bit more work. Okay? And remember, perpendicular lines come together to make right angles, and they can either give you all 4 of those right angles in the image, or they can just have like half of the line, so they didn't finish out this other one, and that's okay. And so either of these would be an example of perpendicular lines. Okay? And so perpendicular lines, their slopes are going to multiply to be -1. So we say that that means that the product of the slopes equals -1. Okay, so let me give you an example. That means line A had a slope of 2/3, and line B has a slope of -3/2. If I take these 2 slopes together, so I'm going to multiply them because product means multiply. Okay. When I multiply them, I'm going to get -1. Now, you might also have heard these referred to as opposite reciprocals. And so the opposites refer to the signs. So this one is a positive and this one is a negative. And then reciprocals means that these are flipped. So like this first one is 2/3. The second one is that same fraction but flipped. And so you can use either of those rules. I was always taught that they are opposite reciprocals. And it works out to be the same thing because opposite reciprocals always multiply to be negative 1. But the official rule is that the product of the slopes, so if you multiply them, then it will equal 1 at negative 1. And so you can see that. I just think it's a little bit faster to recognize opposite reciprocals. And so if you're comfortable with that, then great, and you can use that. If not, multiply the slopes, and you should get negative 1. And again, at that point, you don't have to see a picture or anything. You automatically know that those have to be perpendicular lines. Okay. Finally, we want to talk about how can you tell which line is steeper. Okay. So in this one, I'm giving you line C has a slope of negative 2/3, and line D has a slope of negative 5/4. And you want to take just the number. So we're not interested in the negative sign at all. You can just ignore it. And what we're going to do is you're going to type that into your calculator. And when you type that into your calculator, you're going to find that 2/3 gives you the decimal 0.6 repeating. Okay? And 5/4 gives you the decimal 1.25. And so the line that is steeper is the line with the bigger number. So that means that line D is the steeper line. And again, you have to ignore the negative sign for this. It's like taking the absolute value of that fraction. Okay? So we have a coloring sheet in class tomorrow. Hope you'll look forward to that. And thank you for watching. Have a lovely evening.